Oh, so I was making a joke! No! Hello, everybody, and welcome to our Marvel lore deep dive. Today, we're going to be checking out Ultron. Kind of timely, considering his recent announcement that he's going to get released in Marvel Rivals. Don't know if he's going to get released yet by the time this video comes out publicly, but we definitely want to know.
Fresh off of his trailer, so.
Yes. We definitely want to know more about him. And I mean, he's one of Serbi's favorite characters, but I believe you don't know too much about him.
He's one of those characters that I love every time he shows up. And I very much enjoy his character, but I've never really read a ton with him in it, if that makes sense, right? I every time he shows up, I'm excited to see him, but my actual knowledge of the character isn't super deep.
And as you guys know, I don't know anything about the comics, so I'm here to learn. Regardless, as per usual, please go and support the original video. Link to that is at the very top of the description, as always. We will be doing this more than likely in several parts, considering that this is a feature-length movie, essentially. So yeah.
One of Marvel's most famous villains, and without a doubt, my absolute...
I've never seen a video from Pastra, but I absolutely love his avatar already.
Yeah.
This is such a cool design. Yeah.
Favorite. I have always had a soft spot for the evil robot archetype of character, and this guy right here is possibly one of the most iconic examples of it in all of fiction. Being a massive fan of this character and a massive comic book fan.
Is that? Oh
That's the
my
original
god.
Ultron, yeah. they teased him in the map showcase. So
really?
So he's in Rival somehow, yeah.
Oh my god, he looks so cute. He reminds me of like original Iron Man.
Angry little guy.
Yeah.
And in general, I recently found myself doing a deep dive into his comic book history, reading story after story featuring the robotic villain regardless of the quality. And following this hyperfixation, I made it all of my friends' problems every single time I found a way to weasel the character into any...
I think Pastra is even worse than you are, Servi. You've only just been mentioning that you would main Ultron in Marvel Rivals, not pinging everyone in Discord about it.
I feel like even with the characters that I'm most obsessed with, I try and rein myself back in. I don't talk about Floyd every sentence. I hold myself back.
You just rename yourself as Floyd's greatest stan, or whatever your username was back then. Let the people know.
Floyd stan.
And every conversation we were having. And that was when I had a revelation. If I can talk the ear off of all my friends about Ultron,
talk to
I
all
can
the
do
internet.
The same to my audience. Welcome to the INFODUMP series, a new series for the channel that is entirely dedicated to giving myself a place to put any and all information I autistically gather about all my favorite characters in fiction. This series does not have a singular format. These aren't video essays, they aren't typical reviews, they are simply an outlet for me to discuss my interests completely and totally unfiltered. In today's entry, we talk about the history.
Honestly, this is so refreshing. Like, I can enjoy the structured video essay, but I feel like the true essence of YouTube is when somebody is talking about something that they really, really love and want to share it with people. And that's it.
I agree.
I love these kind of videos.
Of my favorite Marvel villain of all time, Ultron, and all the crazy things he's experienced throughout the years. So, without further ado, let's delve into it. Now, hold on. I'm gonna have to stop you right there, me from a different recording session, because I think you left out something incredibly important when discussing Ultron. See, Ultron is a robot capable of interacting with and taking over many different pieces of technology, which could include your computer and information.
No.
If we're talking about
Is this
Ultron,
a VPN sponsor?
This is a NordVPN sponsor, I'm calling it.
we've also got to talk about ways for you to defend yourself against such a threat, and I cannot think of any better way than this video's partner, NordVPN.
Yeah.
NordVPN is the absolute best thing you can ask for when it comes to cybersecurity and fighting off any evil, pesky robots that may be trying to get their hands on your valuable information. By using NordVPN, your internet connection will be encrypted and you will be provided with a different IP address and virtual location, which will keep your data safe. In case you were worried about the evil robots adapting, though, and attempting to trick you with harmful software, NordVPN is also able to protect you through Threat Protection Pro, which will check all files you download for viruses or malware, will block any and all harmful sites, and will even block intrusive ads. It also has a dark web monitor, a service designed to alert you if any sites have your information so that you never become a victim of hackers. If you go to nordvpn.com/Pastra right now, you will receive an exclusive deal plus 4 extra months. That is a deal you do not want to miss. And if you end up purchasing the service and find yourself unsatisfied, don't worry, because Nord also offers a 30-day money-back guarantee. Thank you so much to NordVPN for partnering with me for this video, and remember, the link to my special deal is nordvpn.com/Pastra.
How can you resist a face like that?
You do not want to miss out.
I know, the sprite
In order
is so
to properly
endearing.
educate all of you on the complicated history of this character, I've decided to mainly have this video focus on the comic side of things, going into a few key adaptations at the end of the video. I feel like this is the best way to present all the information I've gathered, as in order to properly appreciate the character outside the comics, I feel it only makes sense for you to first develop a strong grasp of him in the comics. Now, for this guy's comic book history, I do not intend on talking about everything because, quite frankly, there's just too much to talk about, and I don't think all of it is necessary. Instead, we're going to travel through the most notable events that have happened regarding Ultron, with smaller, less noteworthy stories mentioned in between to fill any gaps. Actually getting into it, Ultron's story begins with Avengers number 54 from the year 1968, and right off the bat, I'm just going to tell you that this story is immediately convoluted, so strap in.
My favorite kind.
That's all the stories that we've covered ever on this channel, basically.
You see, in this story, a new Masters of Evil team is formed and immediately begins concocting a plan to invade the Avengers mansion with the help of their butler Jarvis, who is being paid off by the villainous team to provide the floor plan of the entire building.
Jarvis? How could you? No!
Betrayed by Jarvis.
Of all people, Jarvis actually a person, though? Not just a voice in my head? Huh.
No, I think he was Howard Stark's butler.
Oh,
Something
okay.
like that.
But then we just kept the name for the AI assistant, essentially.
Now, normally the Masters of Evil were led by the Captain America villain Baron Zemo, but in this story he'd been replaced by a mysterious figure who goes by the name Crimson Cowl. The Cowl was the one who got in contact with Jarvis, offering a large sum of money in return for the floor plan to the Avengers mansion, but in typical supervillain fashion immediately betrays the poor butler as soon as he gets what he wants.
Obviously.
Jarvis is shot and knocked out with a ray gun, and upon the villains deciding what to do with him,
This is so just classic, just cheesy fun. Haha, ray gun time! I love it, man. So cute.
The Cowl requests that they all leave and allow him to deal with Jarvis himself. Long story short, the Masters of Evil manage to infiltrate the mansion as planned, and the Avengers are actually captured. In celebration of his victory, the Crimson Cowl reveals his true identity, Jarvis
Ultron?
the Butler, the true mastermind who is simply—
What? Oh, I was not expecting that.
pretending to have been a pawn in the Masters of Evil's grand plan. But what about earlier when he and the Crimson Cowl were in the same room, you must be asking yourself?
Yeah, who was that?
That was actually a robot that he was using as a stand-in for himself.
And this is when Ultron came in. Oh.
Where's Hank Pym in this? I'm so confused.
So nobody would suspect him. And you gotta love old comics. This kind of stuff was just the plot of every issue. Now, in the very next issue following this big reveal, the Crimson Cowl's plans for the Avengers are properly revealed. What he wants is to put all of the Avengers in one big hydrogen bomb, which he plans on suspending over the Empire State Building so that he can blackmail the American government.
Something like classic comics.
Truly. It has its own unique charm that I don't think anything could ever capture. Quite like these old comics, dude. Yeah, man.
Giving the Masters of Evil a ton of money. If they do not play along, the bomb is dropped, killing thousands as well as the Avengers. If they do play along, then the Masters of Evil will simply drop the bomb in a location safe for the public, killing the Avengers anyways. Now, in true sadistic villainous fashion, the Crimson Cowl left a window for the Avengers to look through inside the bomb so they may see their captors. And it is here where the truth of the Crimson Cowl's identity is revealed again. Yeah, try and follow here, please. So in this moment, the Crimson Cowl reveals that the true mastermind behind the scheme was not Jarvis, who was using a robot as a stand-in, but the robot who was using a brainwashed Jarvis as his stand-in.
Oh my god.
Big brain. The biggest brain.
It's the double Uno reverse card. I have never seen a move quite like this before. Impossible! No one could have foreseen this. And if you did, you probably already knew the story. This is one of those developments that you don't see in modern stories that often because people often consider it way too cheesy and way too childish. But like, there wasn't a precedent like that back then. So we get to have these awesome
the
stories.
Cheese is what you like about it.
Exactly. Yes. Honestly, they probably knew that. They were just having fun with the comics.
This robot was the real Crimson Cowl all along, and he introduces himself as Ultron 5, the first time in comic book history that the name would ever be said. Which, like, if I can go on a bit of a side tangent here, I just love how this story truly embodies dumb comic book camp. Like, what did he get out of doing this? In the first issue where he tried tricking everyone into thinking he was Jarvis, he did so after the Avengers were captured and he was gloating about his victory. And then in this issue, right after he puts them in the bomb, he reveals his true identity as another way to gloat. Like, you'd think he went through all of this trouble to make his true identity a complete secret in the event the Avengers escaped and tried to stop him, but nope, he just immediately takes off the mask a second time just for shits and giggles. At no point could the Avengers fight back. He got no practical use out of doing this. The only reason I could possibly think of for this is just that he's some kind of mischievous little bastard that just enjoyed fuck.
That sounds like Ultron. I don't know much about him, but it sounds a whole lot like Ultron.
With them. Also, one more little detail I want all of you to keep in mind before we continue is the specification that this character is named Ultron 5, not just Ultron. This will be important later. Anyways, this original Ultron story comes to an end after the Avengers are freed from the bomb by Black Knight, bringing about the defeat of the Masters of Evil, but not the end of Ultron 5, who managed to escape and slink into the shadows. This storyline served as an incredibly interesting introduction to what would become one of the Avengers' greatest foes. Ultron right out the gates was extremely interesting for the fact that these two short issues set up a lot of mystery and intrigue to the character. How was this robot built? What motivated him? Why does he specifically go after the Avengers? This storyline set up all these threads for future writers to follow up on in the future, and it wouldn't be long before that potential would be explored further. Ultron's next appearance would be in Avengers number 57, where we would see the introduction of another Marvel mainstay, the Vision. In this story, the Vision is seen stalking the Avengers in the middle of the night, breaking into the home of Janet Van Dyne, also known as the Wasp, in an attempt to murder her. Before he can accomplish this goal, something seemingly goes wrong and Vision is knocked unconscious. He's brought to Avengers Mansion by Hank Pym, the original Ant-Man, where he comes to and reveals that he is a creation of Ultron 5, who was sent to destroy the Avengers. For whatever—
Oh, wait. I never realized that. I guess it's just been a while since I've seen the movies if they covered this.
Vision in the movies was created from the body that Ultron was building for himself. I don't know much about comic book Vision. He's not a character that's ever particularly interested me that much. So.
Gotcha. But regardless here, he's directly connected to Ultron then, in that case.
Yeah.
And was kind of supposed to be a villain? Or was being used, I should say.
For a reason, this purpose he was made for disturbs the Vision, as he seems to carry more human emotion than his robotic creator, and wanting to bring an end to Ultron's scheme, he brings the Avengers to the villain's hideout. Unknowingly, however, the Vision ends up leading the Avengers into a trap, as Ultron predicted this turn of events would happen and actively allowed him to bring the heroes to his hideout so he may kill them all himself. This ends up leading to one final confrontation between Ultron and the Vision, where the two AI face off one-on-one. And this little fight, despite being so short and admittedly goofy, shows us a side of Ultron that is going to be one of the most important and defining character traits in stories going forward. You see, in this confrontation, Vision and Ultron get into this little debate about the value of one's own emotions, with Ultron arguing that Vision's humanity is a weakness he does not carry. Later in the story, however, when Vision gains the upper hand against his own creator, Ultron ends up making an illogical decision when he chooses to lunge at the Vision in a fit of
hypocrites. I feel like Hippocratic characters are some of the most interesting.
Because, honestly, they're kind of relatable. Everybody's a hypocrite. Like, you just gotta accept it, man.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I really enjoy about Ultron is just how he thinks he's the cold, menacing robot, and then he just will throw a temper tantrum.
He loses his cool. Yeah. I wonder what that thing you're feeling right now is called.
Rage, leading to his own destruction. Vision even calls out this hypocrisy, saying to Ultron, quote, "You ridiculed me for having emotions, yet you possess them no less than I." Ultron on the surface
is more emotional than Vision.
From what I remember in the movies, I would say so, yeah. Vision is pretty damn cold.
Like, Vision, I feel like, has more conscious, but isn't very emotive, at least from little bits that I've seen of him. Whereas Ultron he's a pretty emotional dude, actually.
He does seem to be very petty. Yes.
Yes.
Calculating machine that does what he does purely for logic's sake, and yet this story proves that under that robotic exterior, he is every bit as emotional as the humans he seeks to destroy. He throws temper tantrums when things don't go his way. He has a clear and obvious ego which compels him to gloat when he thinks victory is assured, and his drive to fight the Avengers seemingly comes less from a place of objectivity and more that of genuine hatred. Ultron may not recognize it in himself, but for whatever reason, he is very human, and I am really—
Well, the fact that he doesn't see it in himself makes him even more human. How many people out there can't see the stupid shit that they're doing right now? Oh, God. Yeah. Man, this is so interesting. I never knew Ultron's character was this charming. I can understand. Starting to see now why you like him a lot.
Really emphasizing this right now because this little plot point right here ends up becoming his defining characteristic in future stories, and it raises the single most interesting question one can ask about him. Why? Why is he like this? What made him this way? We don't get a direct answer to this for a long time, but we do get bits and pieces to the puzzle along the way, the first of which being the origin of his creation, which we learn in the very next issue. You see, after Ultron 5's defeat, the Avengers immediately considered allowing the Vision to join their ranks. He proved to be a powerful ally, and it was clear that for whatever reason, he actively rebelled against his programming and fought for humanity. But before he could become one of the Earth's mightiest heroes—
taking at the end there.
Yeah, he's a thinking man.
There was one question that needed to be answered, and that question was what Vision even was. Cause yeah, he did help, but so long as his origin remained a mystery, there was no telling what he could do. Vision would try to remember how Ultron ended up creating him, but it seemed as though there were mental blocks put in place to stop him from doing so. The Avengers would eventually find a—
This is honestly a valid concern, considering you were made by one of the villains that wanted to destroy the Avengers. We can't really just let you join simply because you're acting or help to defeat your master. This could still all be a part of Ultron's grand plan.
We know he likes his twists.
Lead, however, when Hank Pym realized that Vision reminded him of an experiment he was conducting not too long ago. See, Hank was trying to create these androids that he called synthezoids, one of multiple attempts at artificial intelligence, but these experiments ended up failing because, well, Hank couldn't actually remember. For some reason, it seemed as though that same mental block that affected Vision's memory was also affecting his own. Thinking this could mean something, the Avengers traveled to the lab in which Hank Pym was conducting these experiments, expecting to find it destroyed, but instead finding it fully repaired yet abandoned. Upon going inside to investigate, Hank would hook himself up to a memory bank to try and search his mind for the truth, and he would find it, learning something that would shock all of the Avengers to their cores. Ultron was created by Hank Pym, an experiment in AI that went completely wrong when the machine came to life on its own, turning on its creator and using a special beam to make him forget he had even built it in the first place.
This is my favorite memory erase beam.
Oh my god, and Ultron here looks so goofy. It's like he's just spraying smoke at him.
Ultron would then continue to use the lab after wiping Hank's memory, building upon himself and designing newer and stronger bodies until he eventually developed Ultron 5. During this time, it was also learned that Ultron had used an old memory tape from the deceased hero Wonder Man, imprinting it into a synthezoid which would bring life to Vision. This entire reveal is part of the reason
Vision was based off Wonder. That's interesting. Okay.
So that's kind of like a soul copy in a way?
Interesting. I guess so. Or at least like a blueprint.
Blueprint. Inspired by Wonder Man.
And why I feel Ultron is such an impactful Avengers villain. Because with this twist, it now establishes a deeply personal connection between both sides. Ultron being the creation of an Avenger means all of his actions now reflect on the team as a whole. It is the Avengers' responsibility to destroy him, not just because of the massive threat he poses to the world at large, but because he was their mistake to begin with. As well as this, it also explains quite a bit about Ultron himself. When Ultron 1 first awakens, we see he immediately identifies Hank as his father, and developing a strange Oedipus complex of sorts, he immediately becomes hostile towards his creator and begins to attack him. Ultron's deep-seated hate for the Avengers comes in part from the dynamic we can now observe between him and his father, giving us a motivation for his action.
Hank's an easy man to hate.
Damn.
Maybe that's just me. Can't stand Hank Pym.
I don't know too much about the guy, but, well, he kind of messed up making Ultron. Granted, he's kind of like a scientist, yeah? So experimentation is his thing.
He's very much a scientist. Hank seems to have some fans from the comics, but, like, I don't understand. I do not like his character at all. So maybe all the Hank Pym fans are going to come out and roast me. I'm sorry. Can't stand him.
I mean, if you are, then let me know the deeper lore on this guy, because I'm not too familiar with this character.
Insufferable.
Oh, damn.
And allowing us to see a little bit more of that emotional side that Ultron is not fully aware of. When talking about Ultron and his complicated relationship with the Avengers, I always think back to this excerpt written by Kurt Busiek that I feel perfectly sums up what I love about him. The excerpt reads, "With Ultron, it's all personal, and at the same time, inhuman, robotic. That makes a fascinating, compelling mix."
Exactly.
Yeah, I love it. Just like contradiction.
The creator knew exactly what they were going for, and they pulled it off perfectly. There hasn't been a character like this yet in the comics, so, good role to fill.
When Roy Thomas and John Buscema created Ultron, he seemed at first to be a killer robot with an admittedly awesome design.
I mean, that wouldn't be interesting. People wouldn't remember that.
And that's been seen so many times before.
Yeah.
Great menacing jack-o'-lantern of a face. But then we found out Ultron was a creation of Hank Pym, one of the founding Avengers, an experiment in artificial intelligence gone awry. Ultron had achieved a twisted sentience and gotten himself a full-blown Oedipal complex, determined to destroy his father and the Avengers along with him. Powerful, menacing, personal.
It's all personal.
Now, with Ultron's origin and motives properly established, it wouldn't be long until the villain would become a mainstay for the Avengers to fight time and time again. Ultron would become one of the biggest thorns in the Avengers' backside, always returning with some new upgrades to back him up. This was the whole gimmick Ultron would have for years.
So that's my biggest disappointment with him in the MCU. Because, like, I know some people don't like his MCU appearance. I quite did. But I hate that he's just kind of done, right? Like, I suppose there's always the opportunity he could come back because it's Ultron. But, like, that is a complaint I have with the MCU in general. It's just the one and done nature of so many of the villains in it. But for Ultron in particular, I'm like, how can you just introduce him and then get rid of him in one movie? Just have him be over. I don't know.
I definitely think the part that makes Ultron scary is his nature as a robot. So he could be everywhere and you would never realize it, regardless of how many copies of him you destroy. I think he's got to have a backup somewhere that you'll never find. So it makes total sense for him to keep on coming back and be relentless. No matter what you can do, he's just going to be there. And as you said in some of the previous reactions, like, when you make a technology, when you make a discovery and you put it out there, it's always going to be out there forever.
Yep, it doesn't go away.
And that is Ultron personified.
Yes.
A mistake that will never go away. Damn.
You'll love it.
Instead of always returning as the same character, it would always be a new model of Ultron with a new design, new...
Oh, and this is also a good point. A lot of artists that get to work on Ultron's story get to put in their own designs. And now we have a ton of skins for Marvel Rivals. Look at that.
So many Robo-Men.
Powers, etc., and etc. I don't plan to go in depth on all of them here because there are just too many to count and some are far more interesting than others, but I will quickly talk about what I think are his most important iterations and the ones I just find the most entertaining. The first time Ultron would return after his original death would be in Avengers number 67, where we would be introduced to Ultron 6. This version of Ultron is perhaps the most influential to the character because it introduced one of his most terrifying traits, that being his pure adamantium body. For those who may not be familiar, adamantium is basically this completely indestructible metal in the Marvel Universe. This stuff is so unmalleable that it needs to be kept in a constant liquid state in order for it to even be cast into a desired shape, because once it cools and hardens, it becomes downright impossible to reshape into anything else. So you can probably imagine, with all that said, why a giant killer robot made entirely of the stuff would be such a massive threat. Most Ultron models going forward would have this adamantium body as a feature, with it becoming one of the character's most iconic and threatening powers he possesses. In order to construct this body for himself, Ultron would use a device called the Molecular Rearranger, which he would make a part of his body in order to change his shape at will. With this device, he could give himself whatever upgrades he wanted alongside his unbreakable body, and of course with this in mind, the only logical conclusion he came to was replacing his own legs with a fucking jet engine that...
It is truly the only logical conclusion. I love how we introduced that this is something that you can't mold, and so we gave him a device where he can just freely mold it and still be indestructible. Comic books.
What's the big lever next to it?
We don't question it, all right? he just he likes the design of that, okay?
If he were driving a motorcycle. Because, you know, that is awesome, and who wouldn't want a jet engine for legs?
Totally.
Following this iteration of the character, as well as Ultron 7, a kaiju-sized Ultron model that crashed Quicksilver's wedding, we would see the next major Ultron appearance I want to talk about with Ultron 8. Ultron 8 appeared in Avengers number 161 and would be the version of the character responsible for one of the most fascinating Ultron stories I've read. This version of Ultron has the appearance of Ultron 5 while sporting the same adamantium body as Ultron 6 and having 2 new abilities, energy absorption and Ultron's most iconic attack, the Encephalo Rays. These rays shot from Ultron's eyes have the ability to incapacitate anyone that gets hit by them, regardless of their power or durability, and upon being hit, they put their target into a coma that can potentially kill them if not treated immediately. Ultron 8 would brainwash Hank Pym into a state of amnesia, manipulating him into helping create a robotic wife for himself named...
Oh!
I forget her name, fuck! They tease it in the MCU too. Her name is on one of the, because that's when Stark is looking through for Friday.
Oh,
fuck, what is her name? Is it Jocasta?
It's a very interesting motivation there, Ultron. But I completely understand, man. It can get lonely sometimes.
Named Jocasta in a storyline that would be known as the Bride of Ultron. Jocasta would be created using the mind of Janet Van Dyne, whose consciousness would be transferred into the machine.
Wait, Janet to be naked for the member transplant.
Yes. Wait, Janet Van Dyne was the Wasp, right?
Hank's wife. Yeah.
Hank's wife. Okay.
What I find so incredibly interesting about this particular Ultron story is how it adds a new layer to his character that we had yet to see. In every Ultron appearance before this, we get this impression that all he cares about is the destruction of the human race, more specifically his father. But in this story, we get to see a more human side to the character that purposely goes against his original motive. We get to see more of that emotional human side to Ultron that is deeply buried in his subconscious in most of his main appearances, this time on full display. In this story, Ultron does not work towards his ultimate goal of human extinction, instead striving for something much more personal, love and companionship. Somewhere in Ultron's cold...
He literally handcrafted his own waifu. What a mad lad. Ultron was a true legit weeb this entire time.
Old mechanical shell, he feels a deep emptiness and a longing for
No, his heart is 3 sizes too small. Aww. Bro, I can't wait till Ultron saves Christmas.
Family, a feeling that he wishes to rid himself of by finding love with the wife of his own creator, and by a strange extension, his mother, Janet Van Dyne. Now,
can we not talk about it like that? That would be just
interesting choices.
I mean, there have been some poorly disguised fetishes that we've seen in comics before, so.
Now, this original story paints this arc as a mere continuation of Ultron's established Oedipus complex, with his mechanical wife Jocasta even being named after Oedipus's mother from the Greek tale his character was inspired by. However, looking deeper into it and having the context of later stories, you can see there's something much deeper going on here than what it's initially made out to be. Jocasta is the second of Ultron's attempts to create a sort of robotic family for himself, with his first attempt being the Vision, whom he made from the brain patterns of Wonder Man and whom he actively refers to as his son. As well as this, Jocasta would not be Ultron's only attempt at creating a wife for himself, with him later creating another bride named Alchema, who he made using the consciousness of Hawkeye's late wife, Mockingbird.
Damn.
Bro, Ultron is Mr. Steal Your Wife. Bro, hide your wives, hide your kids, he's coming. Jesus, Ultron.
Make them shiny.
Oh. I mean, to be honest, I don't blame him. I understand him. I get you, Ultron.
Ultron, for reasons yet explained, yearns for a family in the same way he yearns for humanity's destruction, and he seems to seek it in those that the Avengers affiliate with, as if wanting to be a part of their quote-unquote family himself. Everything he does, rather than coming from logical programming, is the result of latent, erratic emotions that not even he fully grasps. Which begs the question of why Hank Pym would make him this way. It would take over 20 years for this question to be answered, with many iterations of Ultron appearing and leaving throughout that time, like Ultron 11, who fought in Secret Wars and was reprogrammed by Dr. Doom, Ultron 13, who fought Daredevil and had the personalities of every other Ultron sharing a body with him, and one of my personal favorites, Ultron 15, who was a drunk cowboy for some reason.
Why would Ultron make this version of himself? You know, I always wanted to be a drunk cowboy.
Just a bug in his programming. He didn't quite fix it.
Go and live out my fantasy. We need this in Marvel Rivals. Just him in a random cowboy outfit.
The cowboy outfit, yes.
The question would be answered in my personal favorite Ultron comic of all time, Ultron Unlimited, which came out in the year 1999. This story right here is, in my opinion, the definitive Ultron story. It acts as a perfect end to the original arc between himself and Hank Pym, and it gave us the single most impactful twist in the villain's entire comic book history. Ultron Unlimited begins with the disappearances of two key characters, Hank Pym and Grim Reaper, whose whereabouts are completely unknown, but the Avengers suspect to be the work of Ultron. When an attack happens at the Wakanda design plant, the Avengers rush there believing it to also be the work of Ultron, only to find his ex-mechanical wife, Alchema, there instead. There is a fight, she's defeated, and when the Avengers interrogate her about Ultron's plans, she merely tells them to turn on the TV, which leads us to one of the most terrifying displays of Ultron's power that ever has and ever will happen in comics.
Really?
As the TV comes on, we see the nation of Slorenia in the aftermath of an attack. A lone cameraman stands in the midst of the cataclysm, surrounded by death.
I'm assuming this is what the movies are based off of then. This seems kind of familiar.
Yeah.
As he goes to speak to one of the only people he sees still alive in the debris, we see it's none other than Ultron himself, who murders the cameraman in cold blood, causing the feed to go black. We are told in the very next issue that Ultron had wiped out the entire nation of Slorenia in 3 hours.
It's Ultron.
Putting in work.
Yeah. Like, considering his capabilities, this is entirely possible. It's just that he didn't decide to do this until now. He was too busy being a drunk cowboy, all right?
Military couldn't stop him. No heroes they sent could stop him. It wasn't even a proper fight. In the wake of all this destruction, Ultron sent a message to the world, which he recorded while standing on a mountain of human corpses.
Hear me, nations of the world! Slorenia stands uninhabited and ungoverned. Accordingly, I am claiming it for my own, since it stands as eternal proof that human life cannot stand against the steel of machinery. Slorenia has reached its end, but will become a beginning as well. Slorenia is a place of death and rebirth, and will soon take its place as a cradle of a new race and birthplace of my new world.
From this point forward, the story
I love how you can essentially boil all of that dialogue down to "Hello World." Being such a common, like, first line that you learn how to code in, learn how to make the program say "Hello World." Man,
Yeah.
I don't know if that was intentional, but if it was, that's kind of genius. And bro was also trying to pull off the Griffith right there, standing on top of this pile of corpses. But it's still a very striking image. I can understand how impactful this would have been to anybody who read this comic originally.
Comes a giant war against the Avengers and Ultron as he finally attempts to realize his plans to destroy humanity and bring about a new age of metal. The story is filled with phenomenal action sequences and fan service for big fans of the character like myself, with Ultron's army being made up of copies of all his older counterparts. Ultron 1, Ultron 5, 8, hell, even Ultron 15 is here.
Oh my god, yeah, Ultron 1 is right there. He's a little guy. He's gonna shoot his beam and make you forget. Oh my god. Really is just fan service for Ultron. Oh.
Still identified by his goofy cowboy accent that no other Ultron has. Obviously, I'm gonna get into character writing here in a second, but let me just have a moment to fanboy over how incredibly badass this story is, because holy shit is it awesome.
I haven't read the comics before, but just hearing you talk about this, I haven't stopped smiling for such a long time. My cheeks are already hurting. Like, Ultron is just so much fun as a villain, man. I never knew he had all this to him. They gave him so much. It just, I can kind of understand though why people might not enjoy his like movie adaptation, because I did not get this feeling from his character, like not to this extent at the very least.
I feel like he's still fun in the MCU interpretation. Like, you still see a lot of that hypocrisy, but it's just not quite as, I guess fun is the word, yeah.
Yeah, it's not the comic book campy stuff that you see and you know and the writers know and we all enjoy it together. It's just such a unique experience.
Like, you know that awesome sequence in the MCU where all the Avengers are kicking ass against waves of Ultron sentries? That was taken directly from this story, and it is just as awesome here. There's also straight up a point where Thor attempts to destroy Ultron's main body with Mjolnir, and my man just grabs it, and with the newfound power he absorbs from Scarlet Witch, he just royally destroys him for a bit. This story is so incredible.
Thor of all people. And Thor from the comics is like somebody who slays gods, on that level. So
Thor is, very much been nuked to death in the MCU.
So essentially, this fan is peak performance. I guess we just die? Like, what else did we do?
Submit to our new robot overlord?
Yeah, I have a feeling that you wouldn't be too mad about that.
What does that mean?
It means whatever you want it to mean.
Incredibly cool. I just cannot stress that enough. And of course, too, there is just the fantastic character writing we see from everyone in this story. Of course, there's Hank Pym and Ultron, who I will be getting to in a moment, but I would...
Bro, I can't imagine being Hank Pym's situation and being like, I caused this. No matter what I do, I can't take this back. That would be a destruction of my character. Everything that I believed in.
There's no recovering from that,
No! All those lives that were lost that day, you caused it. Oh man. It's a really interesting part of writing to explore when it comes to these kind of characters. You know, they indirectly cause this mass destruction, and it kind of goes against their very philosophy. Great chance to dissect them down to their very core of who they are.
I feel like some of the best moral, explorations come from characters like that.
And maybe this is the moment where Hank Pym became a fan favorite to some of you. Who knows?
I'd also like to bring attention to Tony Stark and the interesting dynamic that this story establishes between himself and the villain.
Well, considering Iron Man's whole thing with him kind of becoming one with his suit and not being able to really separate himself from that, I can imagine that they would have a really cool dynamic between each other. And I think that's kind of how it was in the MCU, too.
I feel like, so people's number one complaint with Ultron in the MCU, I think, is that they changed his origin to be made by Stark instead of Pym.
Yeah.
Which, for me, I never cared that much. Because it's like, I feel like no matter which way you look at it, between Stark or Pym, they're interesting dynamics that you can play with Ultron. I think both characters have really interesting connections and just things to play off of. So it's like, is it a change of his origin? Sure. Is it still an interesting dynamic? Yes. So,
For me personally, I think changing that made kind of sense because, in the MCU, they didn't have this whole history with Ultron leading up to this moment with all the moments with Hank Pym back in the past, which made this moment impactful in the comics, but might not have been all that great if it was done in the movies, simply because, we don't have the lead up to it. So I guess this is the second best thing.
I suppose, yeah. I think people were hoping that they would have that build up to Ultron because he's such a big villain for Marvel.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, where a lot of that disappointment comes to, is that he just kind of showed up in that movie and then was gone, like I was saying, right?
Yeah, I do feel like there's a main issue with a lot of superhero movies where things just get rushed and not given proper time or setup. And like some characters just get introduced because we don't have enough time to make an origin story for them. Arguably, some don't require it. Others kind of did. But yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's a matter of opinion at that point.
In Civil War with Baron Zemo, I feel like whereas he was introduced in that movie, there's enough history in the Marvel universe or the MCU universe that they could pull from to establish his character and have it be grounded, even though they changed quite a bit for his character too. But
gotcha.
With Ultron, the only thing we had seen of Hank prior to that was just him and Ant-Man, which wasn't a lot to work from.
Yeah, makes sense. But regardless, matter of opinion. There's some things the MCU, I think, did great. Other things, maybe not so much. At the very least, they didn't pull a Justice League.
Throughout most of this video, we've discussed how the main dynamic the Avengers have with Ultron is between him and his creator, Hank. But this story sheds some light on other characters like Stark that shows how this unique threat affects them. We see Stark talk about Ultron and how he, in his mind, represents the dark side of all the fantastical technology that the Marvel Universe has at its disposal.
Especially with what Tony can make. We have seen an evil Tony before. He could do literally this if he wanted to.
I don't know when this came out, if this was pre-Superior Iron Man. I think it is. I don't know.
I don't know. We don't know the exact dates and timelines, so don't expect us to know, please. But yeah.
I have a bad memory, so even if I did at one point, no, I don't remember.
just for the context of what I've heard about Superior Iron Man, yeah. I totally get why this would be a part of his character. He can so easily dip into it because of the things that technology can do for both good and for evil. Truly depends on who's using it.
It's always going to be a double-edged sword.
Ultron's very existence acts as a grim reminder of all the times Stark's own technology was used for war, and even if he didn't create the robot, that makes him feel even more responsible for seeing him stopped. It's an interesting look into why Ultron works so well as a true Avengers villain, and how his very existence has narrative effects on the characters around him, even if he isn't largely involved in their own personal stories.
Because the other hero groups might not be as involved with technology, from what I recall. Iron Man is primarily Avengers related, yeah. Because I don't think Ultron's dynamic would be as interesting with a character like, what's his name, Skull Rider? I don't think they would have a lot in common.
A lot of a lot of heroes in general kind of fall into that, like, vaguely convenient power acquisition, shall we say. The mystery chemicals splash Daredevil in the eyes, and now he's blind but has super senses, right?
Yeah.
Whereas with things like Ultron's origins and I guess Stark's like technology, that is more grounded than a lot of other hero concepts, even if it's still fantastical.
I mean, regardless, yeah. They truly struck gold when they realized that Ultron's motivations made for the perfect villain to the Avengers. But yeah, in that case, I completely understand why people were disappointed when it was a one and done. Bro, come on.
And then, of course, there is the single best part of this entire story, the big twist that we've been building up to for this entire video so far. The twist that explains all of the yet-to-be-answered questions about Ultron's personality and motivations. You see, while this big battle's going on in the nation above, Ultron's prime body works away below the surface in an underground lab, where he has slowly kidnapped key members of the Avengers and Avengers-affiliated characters one by one. First Hank Pym and Grim Reaper, and then over time, Janet Van Dyne, Scarlet Witch, Vision, and Wonder Man. Why did he choose these specific characters, you may ask? It's because despite the fact that his plans for human extinction are well underway, he still deep down won't feel completely fulfilled until he's created the family that he desperately wants. And these 6 characters, who are all personally involved with Hank Pym in one way or another, are the people he wants to create his cybernetic family from. He wants his new mechanical race to be created from the modified brain patterns of his captives, each individual slightly different because he intends to splice their brain patterns together to create new artificial individuals. Artificial individuals who will have their own personalities but will be tied to a hive mind that Ultron will be the leader of. Ultron essentially wants to turn the world into one giant mechanical ant colony with himself as the queen, a fitting motivation thematically considering his creator was the original Ant-Man. But that still begs the question of why? Why does he want this? Why is this robot so incredibly human? What made him this way?
Hank, what did you put in the programming? Just tell us, please. Was
Hank,
this like a secret desire that you had this entire time? Did you not feel happy with your current family and how it was working? I don't know. There's a lot of questions you could ask from this, but I don't think that's the direction they're going in. We'll see.
Well, within this very explanation, we get the answer. The answer which isn't explained to us by Ultron, but rather Hank Pym.
How could I do such a thing? How could I even think it? Oh, but I am, Jan. I am. And I always have been. Never told you. Never told anyone. But when I created Ultron 1, I needed brain patterns to base his mind on.
Wait, did you use your own?
What I used were my own.
No! So I was making a joke! No! Not the joke becoming reality! So that's why. Oh my god. How many years has it been since he was introduced? Wasn't it so weird that he tried to make his wife into his wife? But it makes sense because that's his wife!
It also explains his massive ego.
Yeah, there you go. Easy. Jeez. Oh, Hank. Whoa. Bro, this is even more of a character dissection than I could possibly hope for. It's not him indirectly causing this. Technically speaking, it is. But it is literally a robotic embodiment of himself. He could have been the one there. But he decided not to be that person. So this version of him did. Well, shit.
It's funny, in the 6160 like New Ultimate Comics, when Stark was handing out all the, I guess, powers to try and recruit people back into being heroes again.
Yeah.
Well, not again, because they never were in that universe. But he sent one to Hank and Janet. And Hank just hit him. He was scared of it. He didn't trust himself with it, really. So it wasn't until Janet found out that he had been holding on to him. She was like, heck yeah, I want to be a hero.
I guess Janet doesn't have as deep of a complex as Hank over here. Regardless, though, I can't really blame the guy. He's seen his own actions play out literally in front of his eyes and is experiencing the consequences of it. Yeah. I wouldn't be a superhero after that either. Not gonna lie.
Well, in 6160, he never was a hero. Like, this was like, the world was reset and the heroes never got their origins. So that was just him knowing his own nature. Where he's like, I don't know, man.
Introspection. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Why is it so good? Why is the writing so good? There's so many people working on this project, and we were able to land the touchdown, and nothing got messed up in between.
It's so good.
Nothing to say to that, Jan. There really isn't anything you could say, is there?
Yeah.
Ultron is me. That's my mind. Stripped of conscience, of morality. But my mind. It's what I must be, what I must think, somewhere deep inside.
I also greatly appreciate that this is voice acted with quite
it's
sincere voice acting. I like
this a lot.
Yeah. And now I also understand why people are disappointed that this wasn't what they got in the MCU version. Because, wow.
It's a very watered down, kind of nothing origin for Ultron in the MCU.
The dynamic with Iron Man is interesting. But regardless, that is always going to be a secondary plot compared to Hank literally.
But you still get a little bit of that mirror with Stark and Ultron in the MCU, but it doesn't have nearly as much meaning because you haven't had all this buildup of all of Ultron's actions leading up until this point.
Yeah. Man, I'm just floored by what the comics were able to do.
Ultron was created using the same brain patterns as his own creator, Hank Pym. Everything he does, every act of evil, every plan to create a family that he yearns for but can never have, that all comes from the part of his mind that is Hank Pym. And in order for you to properly understand why this twist is as impactful as it is outside of that basic knowledge, I feel like I'm required to go on a little bit of a side tangent about Hank, because these two characters exist as two sides of the same coin. Everything we learn about Hank tells us more about Ultron and vice versa. So let's talk about Hank for a moment, shall we? Hank Pym was one of the founding Avengers and the very first character to don the identity of Ant-Man. An accomplished scientist and creator of the size-altering Pym particles, he was a well-established superhero for quite some time. However, I feel like what makes Hank Pym stand...
Give you powers.
So, I don't recall the name of Ant-Man in the MCU, but it's not Hank, right?
It's Scott Lang. Yeah, no, he is one of the more recent characters in comics to carry the Ant-Man mantle. He might be the most recent. I don't know Ant-Man that well.
Okay. Was there a particular reason why they chose Scott over Hank? Or did the timeline just not work out?
Scott's more likable.
Damn.
I'm sorry.
Yikes. Poor Hank, man. Bro's going through it. Also, Servy's a savage. You guys might think Servy's pretty soft-spoken most of the time, but Servy's the one who says the things most directly that other people wouldn't say in these kind of situations. And that's why I appreciate Servy so much.
I'm sorry.
You don't have to be. Own it.
I think Scott's character has more dynamics to play with in something like that, especially since they already had Stark, who has kind of that similar roles as Hank
playfulness,
in that
I guess.
Context.
Yeah.
Well, just kind of the inventor, big ego, thinks he's the smartest guy in the room. There's a bunch of them in the comics, but...
Okay, well, they just be doing MCU things.
I think the weirder one is, why did they choose not to have Janet as the Wasp? I guess because they wanted someone who could be the same age as Scott to be the Wasp, or because they wanted a romance. I don't know. But Hope in the comics is not the Wasp and has no real connection. So she's just kind of, well, she has a connection, but it's not the Wasp. She's a villain in the comics. But yeah, that was a weirder turn to be oh, okay, we're making her Wasp. Interesting. Okay, I don't hate it, but
Gotcha. Yeah, I have no context for this, so I didn't know.
And out compared to the other heroes around him is that his character had quite a troubled and dark career. Throughout his comic history, we see the slow decline in Hank's own mental health. The character struggled from undiagnosed bipolar disorder for quite some time, and on top of that, struggled with intense depression and insecurities. Hank always felt emasculated by those around him, including his own wife, Janet, and that emasculation had led him down the path of trying to create and do something bigger and better than his discovery of the Pym particle. Ultron was just
because he felt like he was never good enough. I can see a lot of these insecurities being embodied by Ultron being brought to its extreme conclusion when you give unlimited power to somebody like that.
And this is one of the things you see people argue with the most post-MCU, Ultron, right? Is the whole, Hank versus Tony making him. Because Tony has that, history with robotics and making, it's very on brand for Tony to make something like Ultron.
Yeah.
Whereas it's a lot more of a of a left field kind of move for Hank to make a robot like this, more so. But given the context of the story, it's okay, so Hank wanted to do something new.
Yeah.
So that kind of, it makes sense in that aspect. So it's like, and again, you have the long-standing history with Ultron here, but I feel like if you were to replace it with Stark with that similar kind of amount of history behind it, you could have equally interesting stories to tell. They're just different.
Well, given the context, it makes sense for his character with wanting to prove himself to the world. Or prove, well, he says to the world, but it's really to himself.
One of those failed attempts, with another experiment blowing up in his own face so badly that it caused him to develop schizophrenia and a new persona called Yellow Jacket.
Oh my god,
I kind of hate how comics keeps doing this. The whole like evil alter ego thing. It's so like.
I feel like it's a mainstay for comics.
Dissociative identity disorder has always had bad media representation. And I feel like comics is at its worst so often.
Well, that's the thing, right? You could say so many things have had such bad media representation. Like like the Yuri character, the lesbian character. You know, some media always being the, you know, I won't talk about it here. Or like Dr. Doom. Yeah, he never gets a good media representation.
I mean, that's a different conversation.
Yeah. I mean, it's different, but still the same ballpark. Yeah. And hey, I haven't mentioned Doom yet, so I gotta mention him now.
When Hank first donned the Yellow Jacket suit, he didn't even know who he was anymore. He had quite...
Oh my god, that suit. Bro. Can you even see to the left and right of yourself? Bro's gotta turn his entire body to look. Oh.
Literally convinced himself he was a completely different person who had murdered Hank Pym. He would eventually recover from this state of amnesia.
Well, technically speaking, he kind of did. Like, he buried that guy deep down under.
Guess, yeah.
But it was clear that Hank was never the same after. He continued to use the Yellow Jacket persona long after, continuing his mental decline until the controversial storyline, The Trial of Yellow Jacket, where he would devise a plan to prove his worth to the Avengers by designing a robot meant to attack them that only he could destroy. A plan that his wife would attempt to talk him out of, which would lead to the single most defining
I wonder why.
There is no way this is ever going to be a good idea. Hank really has lost his mind. And I feel so sad because it's not really his fault. He just has all these untreated conditions, man. He needs help. Genuinely.
Yeah. No, this is the case of like when someone with too much power and no control and they're just left to go on a rampage.
He's just too smart for his own good. And I can understand why the 6160 version of him said no to the powers. Makes complete sense. Yeah. His life would be better off if he wasn't a superhero. And he got help, obviously.
Of Hank's entire career, where he struck her for trying to stop him. This event would cause Hank to be kicked out.
Guess I'll go now. Guess I'll go. So he does.
You should but like
in context, it's so depressing. Without context, this is hilarious.
Right.
Of the Avengers, with him giving up his life as a superhero entirely. Throughout the years, Hank would try his hardest to redeem himself, but the guilt of his own actions would always weigh down so heavily that would always seem near impossible. All of this to say that this is the guy who Ultron got his brain patterns from. A broken, insecure man who constantly felt like he needed to live up to some made-up expectation of himself to justify his place in the world. And once you have that
Ultron
context,
makes so much sense.
Suddenly this twist explains a lot about Ultron's actions by extension. Everything he does can now be viewed through the lens of it reflecting on Hank, telling us so much about both characters. Ultron's hatred for humanity, and specifically the Avengers, can be seen as a manifestation of Hank's insecurity, his jealousy of those around him and their success, his desire to create something that will far exceed them and show his worth once and for all. A machine, Hank's own creation, that has become stronger than the Avengers, smarter than the Avengers. His entire team destroyed by his work, his genius. And yet despite all of that jealousy and loathing, it comes from a place of deep despair and loneliness. Hank wants to prove himself because he wants to belong. He wants to feel like he is just as good as everyone else. He wants to feel like he is respected. And I feel that reflects itself in Ultron's constant need to build a family for himself. Just like Hank, Ultron wants to belong. He wants.
Very much so. And it is really unfortunate that even more so nowadays, there are many guys out there who could probably say that they experience the same insecurities.
I mean,
and they just really need help.
Such an epidemic of people going down that like whole like toxic Andrew Tate timeline, right?
Yeah, unfortunately. I mean, they just want to be seen. They just want to be heard and feel powerful, feel like men, you know, when that's not how you do it. But there's nobody there to teach them. So
to feel loved, respected by a family he builds for himself. He wants Hank's wife, who in his mind is his own. He wants a son, brothers, sisters. He is a creation that is forced to feel all of his creator's pain without the inhibitions or morality that stops him from doing terrible things as a result.
Because he's a robot, he does not feel or understand what these things that he's feeling are. So Hank. Oh, buddy. Ultron also needs counseling. Somebody teach Ultron to be human. God.
Let's put Hank and Ultron on the therapist couch together.
That is Ultron in essence, and that is why I love him as a villain
I love like deeply flawed, like emotionally, like psychological stories. I love this shit.
They're just so interesting to look at and kind of critically think about. Oftentimes when I see these stories, I think about myself too. Like, where do I stand? What do I think about this? And how could I use this to improve myself or understand the people around me? It's also pretty natural, I suppose, for an introvert to kind of want to learn more about people without actually having to interact with people. And this is like a perfect medium to do that, yeah?
True.
The thing with media is that oftentimes it can be completely over the top and some people can be just straight up evil. But it's also super important to have these kind of stories because you might not ever meet somebody like this. But if you do, then you know how to respond to them.
Yes, when we meet Ultron in real life, we'll know what to do.
I'm not saying it has to be Ultron and he has to destroy a country. I'm saying when you meet somebody who's completely insufferable, you can understand that it comes from a root of insecurity. And that is the lesson of the story here.
In the world.
And you can empathize with them and maybe help them, or well, if you can't, then know that it's not much you can do. Sometimes some people just have to find their own way, and it might take them longer than others. That's just the way the world works.
He isn't just your typical evil robot. He is a deeply complex and fascinating character who acts as the perfect nemesis to Hank.
You'd love to see it.
And that is why he is my favorite Marvel villain, and by extension, why Hank is my favorite Marvel hero. Anyways.
Well, there you go. We found a Hank Pym fan.
I mean, fair enough. Like, I can understand that. I still think he is an annoying and insufferable character. So I do not enjoy reading him in most contexts.
I won't fault you for that, because I also find Shinji from Eva to be super annoying and insufferable. But the thing is, right? That's his entire character, and it makes so much sense for his character. Of course he would be. I would be too if I was in his position. But sometimes you just feel things as a human, and there's not a whole lot you can do about that. Because we're both human, right? Right, Serby? Yeah, totally.
Long side tangent aside, Ultron Unlimited continues after this twist with one massive final battle against Ultron and his army that is seemingly unwinnable. Ultron's army is too big, and while not all of them are made of adamantium, the main body, as well as quite a few of his sentries, are. When all hope seems lost, a new Avengers member, Justice, appears on scene with a new, highly volatile Antarctic vibranium that supposedly has the power to destroy any metal. Hank Pym gets his hands on it, and in a phenomenal set of pages, he uses it to bring an end to his creation once and for all.
It has to be him. He has to be the one to do it. There's no other person who can. He also needs to give himself closure. This is important.
Yeah. Ridding himself and the world of his greatest mistake. Ultron Unlimited ends on a bittersweet conclusion. The day is saved, Hank finally feels a sense of closure, but things aren't entirely over.
The people are still dead. Everybody's dead. There's not a whole lot you can do about that.
Alchema is seen standing in the ruins of the battle, carrying the brain scans of the 6 Avengers that Ultron had made. Ultron's plans may very well be completed, just not in the way he expected.
And that, I think, is where we're going to stop for today. It has been a pretty long recording session for us, so we'll get back to it next time, dudes. But man, I'm so 37 minutes into this 2-hour video, I've gained such an appreciation for this character that I never knew he could be this deep and this interesting.
Yes, I'm so glad.
When it comes to like comic book heroes as a casual looking at it from outside, you think it's just silly fun. But once you open your mind and you accept more thoughts and you actually learn about them, god damn, there's so much good writing here. I will never look at the enemy Ultron strategists flying above the battlefield the same way ever again. Granted, I will still shoot them down, but I'll appreciate them more. So anyways, dudes, thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed, and we hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. We'll catch you guys next time for some more Marvel lore. Later, dudes.
Bye-bye.